are links that will work. So when you get the access to the slides, what you will be able to do is to just go ahead and click on the links, and then they will take you directly to the websites that are mentioned. Oftentimes the links are a hyperlink, so it might say something like "Help me grow Orange County" on the slideshow, but then if you click it, it will take you to that website. So my name is Maureen Dillon, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker at the Center for Autism. Today, joining me are two parents, Shanae Stump and Cecilia Rideout, and I'm really appreciative of them and excited to have them joining us today. Our learning objectives for today is for attendees to be able to identify at least 3 community resources that are available to children and families with autism, with ADHD, and other special needs. We're hoping that attendees will understand the importance in accessing these resources to support their child's development, and that attendees will learn about advocating for their child with special needs and supports available to parents to strengthen their advocacy skills. Just to let you know, I don't have any conflicts or disclosures to provide. So this is a little bit about the agenda for the talk today. We will talk about the impact of getting a diagnosis. Then we will shift into growing resilience as a parent and as a family. We'll focus on resources for learning about autism and ADHD. Then we'll talk about resources from the regional center of Orange County or other regional centers. We will talk about resources for connecting. These are things like parent and caregiver support groups and also self-advocate groups. Self-advocates are persons who identify with having a disability themselves. So it is very common in the patient population that I work with that I may have a patient with a diagnosis of ADHD and also a parent with a diagnosis of ADHD, or a patient with diagnosis of autism and a parent who may also themselves think that they are on the autism spectrum or on the ADHD spectrum. Then we'll talk about resources for recreation and social opportunities. And then we'll talk about advocating for your child. So family pressure, some of you listening to this may have received a diagnosis several years ago. For some of you, this may be a newer diagnosis for you. In either case, the pressures can sort of occur at various stages or developmental milestones of your child. Sometimes it feels like when there is a diagnosis, that diagnosis is almost like a new family member, a whole new entity to address and care for. There's many challenges that can cause a lot of stress, from the process of getting to the diagnosis, to dealing with behaviors, trying to get to multiple therapy appointments, dealing with response of family members and friends. Families also struggle with lots of challenges on a daily basis. Those can be behavior issues, communication or language issues, dealing with how others perceive you or perceive your child and the things that they may say that sometimes are well-intended but not very helpful. Some parents have ongoing feelings of grief or guilt, like, what if I would have done this differently? Or is this somehow my fault? Am I doing the wrong thing? And many parents will express a feeling of a lack of confidence in their parenting or decision-making capabilities. The COVID-19 pandemic has obviously impacted all of our lives and added so many stressors for families. So when we talk about this whole area of, how to connect to supports and services, I definitely realize or recognize the added challenges given where we're at in this phase of the pandemic, or sort of trying to return to life that we might have had before the pandemic. Some of the challenges that we're very aware of are the social isolation that many of us had during the worst part of the pandemic. Definitely decreased services. Many programs closed or closed temporarily. There were challenges with virtual versus in-person therapy, as well as virtual or in-person educational supports. Financial impact, which continue to be a major stress for families. Job impacts, which shifted significantly throughout the various phases of the impact, and continue to be a factor in many sectors. Managing working from home with children at home, caregiving for sick family members, the fear that many of us experience on a regular basis about getting sick or just being exposed, and what that might mean for ourselves, our children, our families. We're continuing to deal with labor shortages and many more. Okay, so that is sort of in a nutshell, so many things that can be challenging and burdensome and difficult for families. And so as a social worker, one of the things that I love about my field is that we really try to approach things from a strength-based perspective. And so we try to find the positive, or we try to grow the positive. And so shifting gears a little bit, and want to talk about growing family resiliency. So in the face of so many challenges, challenges that you may have had prior to having a child diagnosed, challenges that perhaps felt like they got more difficult when a child got diagnosed or children got diagnosed, and then added on top of that the global pandemic. Let's talk about what we can do to sort of emerge from that stronger and more resourceful. And so that is really what resiliency focuses on. It's positive transformation and growth that enables us to deal more effectively with challenges. And we really recommend this site. This is a hyperlink from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. They have a whole division on family resiliency with further details there. So what we'll be talking about over the next section is really what things can we do to grow our resilience as families. And so we are going to now pause here, and I'm going to turn it over to one of my parents that is joining us to speak today. Ms. Shanae Stump is going to be sharing her experience.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I appreciate it. So currently I have a 4-year-old that was diagnosed just last year with autism, and it was honestly the most bittersweet day of my life. To finally get an answer to all the questions that I had, it was amazing, but I couldn't really understand things like his isolation on play dates, his obsession with wheels on any kind of vehicle, the lack of response when I called his name, like he wouldn't even turn, or his lack of eye contact. So once I did receive the diagnosis, the reality sunk in that my son was special needs, and I have no information or education on the matter. I had no idea how I was going to afford treatment, what kind of help he would need, or who I would need to contact to begin the process of getting this help. But thankfully, because I was extremely determined to learn the process and get whatever we did need, I was able to be vulnerable and ask around to see what could possibly be done. The first call I received after the diagnosis was the very next day from a company trying to assist with the process of getting funding as a parent becoming the personal caregiver for their child with a disability. The program is called In-Home Support Services, IHSS. And the company wanted to assist by completing all the paperwork and documentation. However, once I was approved, I would be subjected to paying between $3,000 and $6,000 back for their work. So after hearing the company charge such a large amount, I decided I'd call them back, and I wanted to do my own research to see if I could do the process by myself. And I was completely shocked that I could. The process was really easy, just really long. And if I didn't research this on my own, my son and I could have been robbed of funds that were basically allocated for him. So not only did I find out that my son was autistic, but I found out that there was vultures, in a sense, out there who are preying on those who don't have or who have insufficient knowledge. And the only way to stay on top and ready to battle for your child, you have to become vulnerable and educated. So I started joining online groups, especially those on Facebook, centered on autism, to read and ask about others' experiences. I made an introduction post and expressed my concerns, his new diagnosis, what state I lived in, and my sheer desperation for advice. Within minutes, I received so many replies with resources available within the community. I learned about the regional center for the first time, and I reached out to them for assistance. Unfortunately, I was told my son was ineligible due to his age because he was 3 at the time, and that I needed to contact his insurance company for further assistance. So I contacted his insurance, and then we were able to receive ABA therapy, speech, and occupational therapy. However, only 2 of the 3 were available due to long waiting lists. And with the waiting list, you can sometimes be forgotten in the hustle and bustle. This occurred for occupational therapy. So I strongly recommend that you ask for the contact information for every facility that your child is approved for, and stay in a routinely check with them, even if you're on the waiting list, to ensure that paperwork is still valid and that your child's place is still being reserved. Initially, I was really overjoyed with ABA. I thought they were going to become a new part of a family in a sense, since they would be present every day of the week. However, I noticed that almost every month, my son was getting a new therapist. And I knew that was hindering his success as well as frustrating him and possibly traumatizing him. So after the 4th one in 3 months, I informed the BCBA that if we had to get another therapist, I would have to terminate services. And I found out that a lot of parents don't, they're unaware that this is something that they could do. And even though insurance is paying them, I was not going to keep them around if they weren't being beneficial. And I say this because, again, as parents and caregivers, although we know that something isn't too right, there's many times where we just go with the flow and give up. Assuming that our child will get the hang of things eventually. And as parents, we really can't do that. In terms of your child, especially your special needs child, it's imperative that you are their voice. A lot of the services provided for our children are under our employment, meaning that they work for you and your little munchkin. If you voice your concerns to them and there isn't any action or game plan being taken, know that it's your right to hire and fire as needed. Not everyone will be a good fit for your child, nor will every program be. So it's up to us to continue to be vigilant so we can ensure the success of our children's well-being. The BCBA and I became pretty close, and one day I expressed my concerns on finding alternate programs for my child on the spectrum, as the regional center denied me on the first call. She was really shocked. She informed me that this isn't a true determining factor, his age. Although they are somewhat centered for children 2 and under, they accept anyone with an official diagnosis. So she recommended that I contact them again, and if I was told the same thing, to ask for a supervisor. And lo and behold, I called the next day and was told again that he was too old. So I stated that I would like to speak with a supervisor, and my son's case was able to begin. Again, this might not have occurred at all, or even until a way later date if I decided to stop trying and work with the tools that they provided. So even after the long process of approval, I haven't really received benefits from the regional center. I did ask about what activities and resources are available to my child a couple of times, including respite from my liaison worker. I've only been referred to the regional center their website, which is in dire need of an update as it has no current information on much about autism or ADHD. When I expressed this again, I was once again referred to the site. So I was getting a little frustrated once we were approved with the regional center because it seemed as if we weren't really being focused on. So I really expressed to them that I needed someone that's knowledgeable in the field of autism. And basically, I expressed this to the BCBA, and she let me know as well that it's their job at the regional center to help us since they have so much knowledge. And if anything, go ahead and request for a new liaison because it's their job to help make this process easier. So I understand that things take time. And again, if you feel like you're being put on the back burner, don't forget you can always request for someone new. The Center of Autism has a grant from the state of California Department of Developmental Disabilities to address the kinds of challenges I described. Through the grant, they provide educational workshops for families, and I have been attending these workshops so I can learn more and also give feedback to the Center of Autism and the Regional Center about what families need. Another huge issue I had was a controversial information given about receiving an aid for school and daycare. I enrolled my son into daycare in September, informing the director and staff of my son and his diagnosis. They kind of brushed it off, saying he'll do just fine and that kids will adapt with time. They took my son in, and within the first week, they were contacting me saying that they were ready to disenroll him due to his meltdowns and aggression. They were saying that my son needed to be held down at times and that he was a huge danger to everyone, including the teachers. I expressed that when his anxiety and sensory is extremely heightened, he needs to de-escalate. Someone just needs to take him out of the room to reset for a few minutes and help explain to him what's going on so he doesn't feel so helpless and unaware. She compared his actions, persistence to either get what he wants or follow through with something to one of a gang member. And I immediately knew that they were racially profiling my son as well. The director expressed that there's 2 teachers per classroom and about 24 to 26 kids per room. She stated it would be a violation if one teacher were to take him aside for even a minute. And I was in utter shock. Definitely my fault for not asking about the ratio before. But just to be like, I just think you have to be kind of logistical. 1 adult for 12-ish tiny ones. I can't even fathom having that much pressure for myself, but a teacher being put in such a predicament alone is overbearing. Long story short, the daycare stated the only way my son could stay is if he had an aide and that the regional center could provide this. So I reached out to my liaison person and I didn't get a response. So I emailed her supervisor and she answered explaining that I needed to reach out to the school district. And then I asked the school district and I was actually able to receive full daycare for my son for free. So in the end, I didn't end up needing an aide. And the school district has classes geared for children on the spectrum. So because of this, I have not had one early pickup call or an issue of a meltdown. So it worked out, and it worked out better that he was able to get assistance from the school district. What really pushes me is reminding myself that I am the voice for my child. I can't be shy, I can't feel afraid, and I must keep going for him. We only want the best for our children, so if you're unhappy with any of the services you're receiving, you have to be sure that you're speaking up on it to see what other options may be available. And speak to multiple sources, friends, teachers, online groups, pediatricians, your insurance, anyone. It is a lot of work, but it provides you with enough data and strong information so you can make the best decisions for your little one. And that is my share.
Thank you so very much, Nate. I really appreciate you sharing your experience with us and the families that are joining us today. It's very powerful. So I'm going to return to the presentation part. Let's see. Asa, I'm It's telling me that my screen sharing is paused. Let me try that again. Apologize. See. It wouldn't be a Zoom presentation without a glitch, right? Okay.
So it shows that there should be multiple participants can share simultaneously. So is it allowing you to share now?
It is not. Let's see. Let me just try one other thing here. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, I think we've got it. Thank you for your patience. There we go. Okay, we're just gonna click through these quickly. Thank you. Okay, so you heard about sort of a variety of ways that Shanae managed dealing with the new diagnosis and trying to navigate the system of services. So the first one that I want to highlight is in the area of learning, and this is learning for parents, caregivers, family members. And so this is not an exhaustive list. There are definitely other fantastic resources out, but in the interest of trying to give you some great resources and not overwhelm, I've sort of stuck to these couple here. So for autism, I highly recommend checking out the Autism Speaks website. Specifically, they have a newly diagnosed toolkit if that is relevant for you. And then they have a couple of dozen other toolkits, everything from going to the dentist to how to get a haircut to potty training, dealing with constipation, dealing with picky eating, puberty, and then several around transition to adulthood. These toolkits are free, available to be downloaded. There are also several videos that are available that sort of do brief discussions on some of the components of the toolkit. And so I really recommend checking it out. You will be surprised at the number of resources listed. And as a member, a clinic of the Autism Care Network, several of these toolkits were directly developed by colleagues of ours, as well as with members of our team through the network. The second resource I would recommend is if you have a child that has a diagnosis of ADHD, either ADHD on its own or ADHD along with autism, I highly recommend checking out CHAD, which is Children's and Adults with ADHD. It's a national organization, and then there are chapters throughout the country, including in Orange County, which I will also talk to you more about. They also have an ADHD toolkit. They have an extensive resource library, and then they also have online trainings available for parents. I do want to note that regarding school resources and dealing with special education, please check out Dr. Carey's talk, which is also being featured at this conference. That recording will be available, and I will not be covering school or special education during today's talk because that is being addressed in the other talk. Now, we heard a little bit about the Regional Center of Orange County, and frankly, I could do a whole talk about the Regional Center, but in the interest of time, I am just going to give you some brief overviews here. The Regional Center of Orange County is one of 21 private nonprofit organizations. These are all contracted by the state of California under the California Department of Developmental Services, and they coordinate lifelong services and supports for individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. And so autism is a developmental disability. ADHD, for the purpose of Regional Center, is not considered an eligible disability, but autism is. And if you do want some more information about the regional center, this is a hyperlink to the intake website, webpage of the regional center, which will talk more about eligibility. In addition to having a qualifying diagnosis such as autism, there's also a level of disability that the regional center evaluates to determine eligibility. So not all of our patients, for example, at our center that have autism have a level that is impacted to qualify for the regional center. But if you are a family that is looking for more resources and supports, I highly recommend checking this out. Then what I have provided below this is a description of all the regional center services. And so again, this is a hyperlink. It's going to take you directly to the webpage on the regional center website where services are described, and they do have this in multiple languages based on age. So they talk about services from the 0 to 3 age, then they talk about services from age 4 to 21, and then they have services for 22 and up. The other thing that is on this page is a list of all agencies that are vendored with the regional center. This list is very extensive. It's about 70 pages long. It looks like a big database file, but I think it's really important so that parents and caregivers are aware of all of the agencies that do have contracts to work with the regional center, so that when you're wondering, okay, well, it says that regional center can help with therapy, what kind of therapy or what companies are in the have a contract to work with regional center to provide that. I will also share here, there's separate trainings available about this, but there is a newer type of service available from regional center. This is for all regional centers across the whole state of California, called the Self-Determination Program. And this allows families to access services that will be paid by regional center, but are not necessarily vendored with regional center. And so if you're thinking, well, I have regional center, but none of the actual companies that they're directly contracted with are really what would be helpful, but I do have needs for myself or my child, you might be interested in checking out the Self-Determination Program, which allows more flexibility for families to find services that will work well for them. Next, you'll see there's a link to the Comfort Connection Family Resource Center. You do not need to have a child that is connected with regional center to access their services. Their services are open to the public. So while they are connected to and part of the regional center of Orange County, they actually operate quite independently. And as I mentioned, they are able to connect with and speak with and provide resources to families who are not part of the regional center. So I have also put their contact information there. And if there are any families with adolescents attending this training, I really encourage you to click on the link that says Zoom Ask the Experts, which has just been shared by the regional center. And so this is a series that is going to run twice a month from October through the end of June 2023, covering various topics related to transition to adulthood and adult services. And I really encourage families to check out that resource list. So the next section that I want to talk about is connecting. So resources for connecting. And so one of the ways that parents can connect, unfortunately, this has continued to happen throughout the pandemic, but many agencies transitioned from in-person connection to virtual connection, is by connecting to support groups or parent-to-parent groups or self-advocate groups. Again, I mentioned earlier, self-advocate is a way of describing persons themselves that identify as having a disability, and sometimes that is very common in our patient population. And so the first link here is actually a list of probably, gosh, over 30 or so parent-to-parent and support groups that are available in Orange County. There's also a section of this list that is about sibling support groups. So if you are here today and you are thinking, this is something that might help me, I definitely recommend checking out this list. They're organized by condition. So there's many conditions beyond just autism and ADHD, which is our focus today. Then there's also groups that are focused by certain languages or faith groups as well. Secondly, our center, the Center for Autism, has a parent-to-parent group that meets monthly virtually, and I highly recommend considering our group as one to try out. That's one thing I'll mention, is that a lot of times parents try one and they feel, gosh, this was interesting, but this really isn't quite the right group for me. So encourage you to not give up, maybe try a couple others, or call the leaders of the parent group and maybe describe a little bit about what you're looking for to see if that will meet your needs and be a good group for you to try. But not every group is for every person. So you have to definitely kind of look around and find one that works well for you. Third, our center has an Empowering Women of Color group, and both Ms. Janae and Ms. Cecilia, who are speaking with you guys today on this talk, have been joining our center through this group, which is facilitated by our parent advocate at the center, Nellie Valentine. This is a phenomenal group. It is part of the service access and equity grants that our center has from the Department of Developmental Services. We are proud to share that we've had a grant from the Department of Developmental Services on service access for the past 5 years. And this grant is because the state does recognize that families do struggle and experience a lot of challenges when they are trying to access regional center services for their children. And so the state is funding organizations throughout the state to help parents to be more informed about various services, and then also help parents in the process of accessing those services. So our grant focuses on families who identify as Latinx, Latino, Hispanic, and Spanish speaking, as well as families who identify as Black, African American, Caribbean, and multiracial. And so the Empowering Women of Color group is a group that is meeting in English and welcomes families from all backgrounds to join and connect for addressing the issues that they're experiencing in navigating these complex systems, and to get more support. Next group you'll see here is the Orange County Asperger's support groups. Most of us in this field acknowledge that Asperger's is sort of a label that we used to use, but is not really an official diagnosis anymore, but is still a way that people often sort of refer to or characterize what is known also as high functioning autism. So children with autism or adults with autism who have impairment due to their autism, but their cognitive skills or their learning skills are in a more typical range. And so the Orange County Asperger's Support Group has been around for a very long time. And so they have kept their name despite some of the diagnostic changes, just because for consistency for purposes. And every month they have groups for parents, they have groups for adults, self-advocates. They also have groups for partners of people on the spectrum, and also groups for women specifically with autism. Then they also offer several educational presentations, and they have special topic series. So if you are thinking, gosh, I would like another group to connect with and get even more information about autism, I highly recommend checking out their website, subscribe to their newsletter. I'm always happy to see the topics and the speakers that they have on their schedule. Along the lines of ADHD, the Greater Orange County CHAD chapter is connected to the organization I shared with you previously for learning. So again, CHAD, and they have groups that meet monthly as well as have educational presentations every month. And they also have groups for self-advocates as well. So I highly recommend their programs. There is another great resource in Orange County, and it's called Helping the Behaviorally Challenging Child. While this resource is not specific to a particular diagnosis, the commonality is that parents that are accessing it are having challenges with their child's behavior and are looking for other ways to address that. And so they provide an evidence-based curriculum on addressing problematic or challenging behavior. And then they also provide an ongoing support group for parents that have attended those classes. And many of the parents that are involved in this do have children with ADHD and or autism. So if your struggles are particularly around behavior and kind of coping with that and dealing with that, this may be another great resource for you. And then the final resource listed here is NAMI Orange County. And so NAMI is another national organization addressing mental health needs. And they have a very active Orange County chapter with ongoing parent groups, parent classes, family classes, as well as many, many teen events. So I highly recommend that resource for anyone who has a family member or themselves is needing support around mental health. So the next area that I'm focusing on here is recreational and social opportunities. And so beyond the therapies and connecting with others, something that we know is very important for all of us, and this was definitely highlighted during the worst parts of the pandemic when a lot of these types of activities went away, is the importance of connecting to recreational, extracurricular, social opportunities. And we know that those can be particularly challenging for families that have kids with ADHD or autism or other conditions to find. And so one of the greatest resources that I can direct you to is actually put together by the Comfort Connection, that Family Resource Center at the Regional Center that I previously mentioned. So they actually every year they update a recreational resource guide. It is over 20 pages long, and it is organized, fortunately, into various sections. But there's everything from various sports groups like soccer, Special Olympics, Challenger baseball, specialized basketball programs, various art programs, visual arts, movement arts, performing arts, water recreation. We're a coastal community, and so there's sailing groups and other marine recreation groups, as well as swimming programs for kids with special needs, various martial arts groups, social groups, and more. I can't emphasize enough. Please, if you've never seen this guide, please check out this link after the presentation or in the next couple of weeks and see what you find there. Another recommendation that I have for families is to check in with your local parks and recreation programs or those of a neighboring community. Oftentimes they are offering classes that either would be a great fit for your child, and maybe just having some conversations around what it might look like and what additional support your child might need in that program, or they have specialized programs. They many of the larger Parks and Rec programs actually have adaptive recreation specifically, and so I do recommend reaching out to your Parks and Rec department and finding out what classes or programs they may have that would be a good fit for your child or your children. Then the next resource here is the FACT Family Resource Center. So there's over 16 of these throughout Orange County. And in addition to providing sort of basic needs resources, help with signing up for insurance, access to counseling, access to food assistance. They also provide a variety of youth recreational programs and family wellness services and after-school activities. And you don't have to only access the Family Resource Center that's nearest you. You may actually access family resource centers throughout the county. So starting with the one near you, but then maybe checking out some of the others in your area would be another great way to find activities and programs for your family. And then last listed here is Help Me Grow Orange County, which is a fantastic resource for connecting to all kinds of services. It is like getting to talk to Google rather than just trying to Google things. So I do recommend checking out Help Me Grow Orange County as well. So just to recap, on resources, community resources, whether for yourself, your child, or your family, will definitely support your child's development. I've shared a lot with you today. Think about starting with one or two things. Don't worry about the whole list. Find something that works for you or your child or your family and grow your family resilience. Okay, and so I am going to turn this over for another parent to share her experience. And so Asa, I'll stop sharing and you can go ahead.
Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Cecilia, and thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share our autism journey with you. My husband and I have a 5-year-old daughter who's on the spectrum. When our daughter turned 1, we noticed that she hadn't started speaking yet. We brought our concerns to our pediatrician and were told that because she was so advanced in her motor skills, that her speech would probably come later. But then by 16 months, her speech still hadn't made any progress. So we reached out to a speech therapist to get on one of those never-ending waiting lists.
Asa, just interrupting for a moment. If you could pause the video. We can't see the video. Are you able to share it so folks can view it?
Yeah, so I have it shared. Let me stop share and try it again. Can you see my screen now?
Yes,
Okay.
that would be great. And do you want to start from the beginning? Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry about that.
Hi everyone, my name is Cecilia, and thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share our autism journey with you. My husband and I have a 5-year-old daughter who's on the spectrum. When our daughter turned 1, we noticed that she hadn't started speaking yet. We brought our concerns to our pediatrician and were told that because she was so advanced in her motor skills, that her speech would probably come later. But then by 16 months, her speech still hadn't made any progress. So we reached out to a speech therapist to get on one of those never-ending waiting lists for an assessment. We also brought it up to our new pediatrician, who told us that getting an assessment wouldn't hurt anything, especially if it gave us peace of mind. She also asked us if we'd reached out to the regional center. At the speech assessment, we were given the MCHAT to complete, which resulted in an at-risk for autism. And the speech therapist also asked us if we reached out to the regional center. Now, having heard from 2 different people that we should be reaching out to the regional center, we decided to call. I had no idea what it was, what they did, or what I was even supposed to ask. I just called the number, and I remember saying, I was told by our pediatrician that I should reach out to you. And thankfully, the person who answered the phone was really nice and asked me what my concerns were about my child. And after telling her everything, sort of felt like it moved at warp speed. We scheduled our assessment through the regional center, and very quickly, we became so overwhelmed with all of the acronyms and the statistics and the questionnaires and the paperwork. I just remember feeling like I'd been hit by this wave of emotions. I felt completely overwhelmed by what I was being told. You know, this was our first child, and I am a planner by nature. So I need to know what is going to happen and when. And, you know, when I was pregnant, I read all of the baby prep books, like what to expect when you're expecting. And I just wish there was also a what to expect when having a special needs child version. But through the various assessments, one of the recurring themes that kept coming up for us was, does she play appropriately with toys? And As you can see, one of her favorite things to do when she was younger, and even a little bit now, is to line things up. She was really good at identifying similar objects and putting them in order, being very meticulous about spacing them out. And she would always take a look at the finished product and just look so proud about what she'd done. I mean, we loved watching her do this. I had no idea that her playing like this was something that I should have taken note of. And I just remember sitting in denial for a while. And honestly, I think I was in the denial phase for a couple years. You know, I'm kind of embarrassed to even admit it, but when everything started, our daughter was 2, and there was a big part of me that thought, okay, we're going to just blitz this from all angles. And by the time she's older and starting school, no one would ever know. And I mean, with that logic, I didn't even tell my family or my friends. I think I just feared the stigma. And I really feared the judgment and being perceived as not being a good enough parent. You know, that the issues we were dealing with was just a reflection of my abilities as a parent. And that was really tough to feel. We ended up getting an official diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder when our daughter was 2.5. Immediately following the news of the official diagnosis, the pandemic hit and the world shut down, our services stopped, everything was just on pause. And as I'm sure many of you felt, we worried about all of the lost time and the sudden stopping of all of the momentum we've been building. You know, with the exception of my husband, I really felt so alone in all of this. We just received her diagnosis, which somehow made everything seem more real. And the isolation I felt of not personally knowing any other special needs parents and not being able to go out and meet others who may be going through the same experience because of the pandemic was just palpable. So I did the only thing I could do. I thanked the pandemic silver lining of everything going virtual, and I signed up for every possible workshop or webinar I could find on autism, speech therapy, special education, parent groups, and I got on every newsletter email blast I could find. I joined the parent-to-parent meetup here at the center, and I met some amazing parents. You know, ultimately services started back up again, and as scary as it was for me, once my daughter turned 3, we started preschool. She was in an SAI autism classroom. We started virtually at first, which helped me ease her into the new routine. And once we were able to go back in person, I met some amazing parents, and meeting all of these other parents who were experiencing the same thing as me gave me so much relief. You know, we would end up spending every morning at drop off and every afternoon at pickup talking about outside services we were getting, and do you like your provider? Oh, have you tried this plate with different compartments that make a trail to the preferred food? You know, it was such a huge resource for me. For one, I had this emotional support of knowing that I wasn't the only one experiencing the struggle of finding our way on this autism journey, but I also learned about some great places to go and programs that are available. And I got firsthand feedback of different service providers for ABA and speech and OT. And so now my daughter is 5 and she just started kindergarten this year. I realized we're only 3 years into our autism journey, and yet it feels like so much has already happened. You know, we navigated the toddler years through the pandemic and into elementary school now. And what happened for me was I was just forced to slow down and see things from my daughter's perspective. I think one of the hardest thing for me is resetting my expectations and really celebrating what some might see as small wins, you know, but to us are huge wins. You know, earlier this year, we found a movie theater that has sensory friendly movie days where the lights aren't completely down and the movie isn't too loud, and it's okay if your child moves around or talks during the movie, you know. So we bought our tickets online and we found a social story to show our daughter before going, and we brought along snacks and her water bottle and a blanket, and we were fully prepared to leave at any point that she did not like the experience. And she had the best time. She was so excited to go after we showed her the social story, and she was super excited to get curly fries from the concession stand. And while she got antsy towards the end of the movie, she actually sat and watched and laughed really loud at the funny parts. You know, on the way home from the theater, my husband and I were talking, and I got so emotional because I was just so proud of her. I realized that, you know, your child's first movie theater experience is a big deal and is fun for families, but putting in the work to prepare our daughter and knowing that this might not go smoothly, but in the end, you know, was a fun experience was such a huge win for us. And so making sure to really sit in those moments and recognize the win and celebrate the win is something that I try to do as often as I can. You know, the journey as a parent to understand my daughter's autism is a constant learning experience. You know, things are always changing, and I'm continually learning new ways to support her and advocate for her. And I'm just so incredibly proud of her, and witnessing her resilience is truly just an inspiration. You know, the journey has its ups and downs, and the road can be really challenging at times, you know, but making sure to recognize and celebrate those small wins is really what has helped motivate me to keep moving forward. And whenever I do feel like maybe I'm not doing enough, I always remember that, you know, if you're here today, you're doing enough, you know? And so thank you so much for allowing me to share my story. And I hope that it's provided some insight so that if you are feeling alone, that you know that you're not alone in this.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, for that really important and informative talk for all of us. It was really helpful to hear about your journey and your success. So just kind of finishing up here so that we can get to some questions, hopefully. Recapping a lot of what Cecilia shared with us in terms of advocating for her child. She thought about what does her child need and what supports does she need or her family need, and her experience with trying to kind of get all of the information that she could. You can consider the recommendations from your child's team, their doctors, their care providers, their school providers, and you also think about what your family's needs and priorities are. Then you learn, like we talked about, that might be classes, that might be videos, that might be listening to podcasts, reading materials or toolkits. Think about connecting with other parents, such as in the parent groups. Ask questions, ask for what you need, write down who you asked about what, when, follow up, escalate things as needed and document them. And we heard a lot about that in the first parent talk. You may need to appeal, and then acknowledge your progress, celebrate your progress. Remember that, because you will probably be in a situation again where you're going to need to advocate. And so you want to remember what worked, what did you do, and then share that with others, because that's one of the great ways that parents learn, which we're illustrating today with our parent talks, is by talking and sharing experience with other parents. A couple of really helpful advocacy organizations, Disability Rights California. I recommend this particular site at least 3 or 4 times a week to parents. They have an extensive resource library. Their services are free. They're funded by the state and federal and required by state and federal law. There's also at a local level, the Office of Clients' Rights Advocacy. It's the OCRA that you see there, and they can provide one-to-one support. There's also this State Council on Developmental Disabilities, which also has an office in Orange County that is able to help families. And then at our center, as I mentioned previously, we have a grant, and through that grant, we have parent empowerment groups. We have one group in Spanish, and then we also have a group in English, or Empowering Women of Color group. And then how can you find out about workshops at the center? Please check out our web link here for the education and training site. If you're on social media, please follow us at the Center for Autism or friend us on Facebook. We invite you to join us. If you click this link here, you're going to get a flyer with all of our upcoming classes through the end of the year. And then I've listed out some things that are coming up in the next month or so, as well as pre-recorded sessions available anytime, Autism 101 and Special Education Basics. And we thank you. And I know we're sort of winding down our end of time, but I'll open it up there.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. So we have a couple questions. The first one is, I live in Whittier and my 5-year-old is on the waiting list, which is over a year long. Is there anywhere else I can get him assistance?
Yes, and I did send that parent the direct information about the East Los Angeles Regional Center that I would recommend contacting. They also have a family resource center, similar to the Comfort Connection one that I mentioned for Orange County. And then also for parents to be aware, many mental health providers are also able to evaluate children for developmental disabilities, including autism. So for example, connecting with a psychologist that works with children in your area is another option. And I highly recommend circling back to your child's pediatrician for psychologists in your area that can do those kinds of evaluations while you may choose to also continue to wait. Thank you for your question.
Great. Okay, so thank you so much, Maureen. I'm going to go ahead and put up the poll now since we've only got like a few more minutes till the next speaker. So let me start that for everybody right now. Okay. So I'm going to give everyone just a couple of minutes to go ahead and fill this out. If you're a social worker, psychologist, please fill it out. If you're a parent, you can go ahead and leave the session and then head over to the next session.